This is a Walkman. The Walkman revolutionized how people listened to music and the relationship they had with their musical devices. This led to the nearly ubiquitous, totally individualized music listening we see today among youth. To understand how the Walkman represented a turning point in technology, society, and culture, we must first understand the historical events that led to its creation. After World War II, Japan was devastated. Their cities lay in ruin, mirroring their economy. So how did Japan enjoy so much economic success so soon after a destructive war? Several economic trends occurred that were relevant to the rise of Sony and one of its most successful products, the Walkman. In the wake of their World War II defeat, Japan signed a truce that, among other things, greatly limited their ability to sell weapons. In turn, as a country, Japan invested into the manufacturing of consumer products. A vision or a manufacturing plan with no legal binding was made in the 1970s by Japan's Ministry of International Trade and Industry that said that Japan should focus on knowledge-intensive industries, such as those that use state-of-the-art technology. An organizational shift in businesses and changes to Japan's labor laws also occurred after the war. Due to economic hardships, Japanese companies rearranged into kiretsus after World War II. Kiretsus were groups of businesses and a bank that worked together to be more efficient. After the change in labor laws, managers practically lost the right to fire. Ezekiel Morita, co-founder of Sony, stated in a 1988 interview, "This change meant managers had to pick who to hire very carefully. Departments within a company were often competing with each other." Sony was founded by Masaru Ibuka and Akio Morita as Tokyo Telecommunications Engineering Corporation. The company started in a room of a bombed-out store in 1945. In the early days, the engineers at Sony had to scavenge for parts, while the company barely stayed afloat upgrading radios. Kiretsu's slowed adaptation in business structure because a change would affect multiple parties and would have to be agreeable to all. Sony was not integrated into the Kiretsus because they were a small company, and it gave them the freedom to make a quick structural shift to expedite processes or maximize profit. For example, instead of competing with each other, the departments within Sony worked together on the Walkman. It was unheard of at the time for engineers to get involved with production and marketing divisions, yet everyone worked together for one common goal. Before the Walkman, Sony found success in a predecessor of the Walkman, the transistor radio.
America is on the go from Maine to the Grand Canyon with a portable radio as a traveling companion.
For decades, people have wanted to listen to music while on the move. The first transistor radio was made in the United States by Texas Instruments and Regency in 1954, whereas Japan's first transistor radio was made by Sony in 1955. This invention happened at the same time with the rising popularity of rock and roll music. The timing was not coincidental. People used these radios wherever they went. Unfortunately, these radios had low-quality sound produced in mono.
Mono is one channel of audio. So when you're listening to music, all the sounds in a song, the guitar, the drums, and the vocals, they're all combined to play through a single channel. But with stereo sound, your music is playing from two channels, the left and the right. Elements of a song are separated and assigned to one channel or the other. If you've ever noticed a lead guitar over here and a rhythm guitar over there, that's stereo.
People listened to stereo, a new superior sound, prior to the 1970s using large speaker setups, usually at home or in their cars. Because stereos were large and expensive, families would place the device in the living room and people would congregate around it, making music listening inherently a social activity. The public craved this stereo sound in a portable package. Cassette tapes offered an option. Cassette tapes were invented in 1962, about a decade after the transistor radio. These tapes were played on devices specially made to read them and play music. Cassette tapes had an added benefit over the transistor radio in that they gave the listener more control over what was heard. The boombox took music listening to the extreme. These were large, heavy stereos that people carried on their shoulder or in their hand. They were known for their big speakers and loud bass. Portable and individualized, people used boomboxes to express themselves in a way the entire world could hear. Music was now portable, but it was not private. In fact, the boombox was often criticized for disrupting the space of others. Its loud, oversized look and sound came to be associated with youth culture, urban culture, race, and class.
You bother a lot of people with that?
No. Bother me? Bothers the hell out of me. I think you're invading my life space with that damn thing.
Yeah, I am.
You are, really.
There were people who carried them all over. Why anyone would carry that, it probably took about 20 batteries to operate it.
There's too much noise in the streets as it is.
As discussed so far, several trends characterized how music listening evolved over time. The sheer quality of the sound became better. People began to listen to their music on the go. Music became inherently tied to social activities. Music listening was objectified, tied to a specific listening device. Finally, musical devices took on symbolic value, becoming a symbol of one's fashion and identity. Then came the Walkman. The Walkman represented a turning point in technology because stereophonic, immersive sound became portable for the first time. It was also a turning point in society and culture because the Walkman privatized music listening. There are many theories surrounding the origins of the Walkman. One notable theory was that Morita noticed his daughter come home from a trip and put a tape in her stereo before she greeted her mother. This suggested that music was very important in young people's lives, a finding that still holds true today. A second theory is that one division at Sony was trying to make the Pressman, Sony's tape recorder, stereophonic. When they succeeded, however, there was no space left for the device to record sound. Still, it produced incredible sound for the listeners. Ibuka then took the prototype to Morita, and Sony changed how we listen to music forever. At a time when the trend of bigger and louder music was being popularized, the Walkman kicked off a new trend of personalized, portable, and privatized music devices that greatly characterize music listening today. People began to seek refuge from the chaos in their musical devices. It condensed the full potential of stereo cassettes exemplified by the boombox into tiny, lightweight earphones. The Walkman was not an immediate success. Sales of the Walkman were initially disappointing at a time when their biggest rival was the popular boombox. However, within 2 months, 50,000 units had been sold globally, and within 4 years, cassette tapes outsold vinyl records for the first time ever. Between 1979 and 2009, 385 million Walkmans of at least 300 different editions were sold. Whereas early editions played cassette tapes, later editions played MP3s or CDs, shifting with the times and the technological advances. The Walkman became iconic, perhaps Sony's most important claim to fame. Morita knew the Walkman could take off in the youth community. He also was aware that the only way this could happen was if the device was affordable and advertised in a way young people could connect with. He fought to lower the price and made sure the advertisement was approached to appeal to a younger audience.
The Sony Walkman is a tiny stereo cassette player with truly incredible sound.
As a technological turning point, the Walkman created an immersive experience. Using a musical device to block out the unpleasantries of the world had never been seen before the Walkman. Today, it is very common to use a private music player when outside. As a social turning point, music was no longer a social activity. The original design of the Walkman included 2 headphone jacks and a hotline button based on the belief at Sony that people would still want a social music experience. These features let people listen to music with friends and even press a button so they could speak to each other over the music. However, Sony noticed that people did not use these features often, so they only put 1 headphone jack on the subsequent editions. It seemed people liked to listen to their music alone, basically isolating themselves from others. This was a new type of listening that is carried on to today through the iPod and later, AirPods. Today, the privatization of media devices is extreme. If there is silence, a bud goes into the ear or a headphone goes on the head. Teens use AirPods to fill the void of silence or to multitask and provide a soundtrack for their everyday life. Even though a Walkman and a tiny white earbud with no cord seem very different, the Walkman started this trend of music to block out the world and fill the silence. Many adults today say AirPods are making normal social interactions awkward. Alex Kantrowitz in a BuzzFeed news article said, "It's making life weird for people interacting with those wearing them." In the 1980s, the same was said about the Walkman. The Walkman started a trend of personal, individualized, and portable entertainment in music that has spread to other media, most notably the smartphone, which Common Sense Media has called a constant companion of teens. With the invention of the Walkman and the evolution of privatized media, has the full potential of music been realized? Or are we on track, where the availability of constant entertainment everywhere blocks each other out and leads to social isolation?